Welcome back to episode 252 of the Tallboy Radio Podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, it wouldn't be flowing anywhere if it wasn't without my good friend Gaz tonight. How are you doing?
I'm all good. Even in the world. Hope everybody that's listening in Listenerland is well. And I'm feeling chipper tonight. So yeah, looking forward to this. All good in the hood.
Jolly good, jolly good. Now, we are missing Dave. He may join us at some point, but we didn't have the patience to wait for him. God bless him. But we do have a guest with us tonight. So, Michael, did you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you're going to be talking about tonight?
Hello there, guys. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on. My name is Michael. I'm a football coach, futsal coach, treasurer of a futsal league, league secretary of a football league, involved with a grassroots football club called Ringwood Town, just outside Bournemouth. And apparently I have a day job and a very, very, very frustrated wife and 2 kids as well. So yeah, it's a nice quiet life down on the South Coast.
Jolly good, jolly good. And I generally find that people who have a wife and 2 children have a very frustrated wife. I know that's certainly the case in my experience.
Frustrated wife or life?
Well, life, yeah, life, bit of both, yeah. And I'm sure I add to those pressures. I'm sure I do. But yeah, so futsal, dude. So I was talking to Gaz about. Is it something you'd heard of?
I have heard of it. I mean, I sort of have quite a sporty background, so sort of growing up. I mean, back in the day, you just sort of play football, and then I suppose it's something that I went on like a foreign holiday and I went to Spain and they were sort of playing it with like the softer ball. It doesn't really bounce that much. And I was like, oh, so is that football? And they were like, oh, no, it's like futsal, smaller version. Blah. And I was like, all right, okay. So I had heard of it. I mean, I don't ever remember really playing it. We just sort of played 5-a-side, I suppose, back in the day, sort of smaller court and stuff, smaller pitch. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm aware that it's grown massively in sort of popularity, and I know that the FA went through a phase a number of years ago. I don't even know whether they still do now, just in terms of trying to promote futsal because of the technical aspect of the game, and trying to develop the technical aspect and the younger kids in particular playing it. Just as I say, to not necessarily the physicality, but just the technical side of it, because it's a much quick, fast moving game. So I was aware of it, but obviously not to the extent that sort of Michael's been involved in it. So really looking forward just to hearing his journey as to how he got into it and how sort of it developed from there. And was there a football background and then futsal, or was the futsal then football and all of that? So yeah.
Indeed. Go on. He's fired about 16 questions at you there, Michael. Want to start off by telling us how you got into it?
Well, it's all my son's fault, actually. So he's now 14. How time flies. But from a very young age, always keen to kick a ball around, what have you. So, as you do, local football team, and this a coach called Kai was introduced to us, and he said, "Oh, why don't you come along and have some technique training in a squash court?" And I just 7-year-old son, why not give it a go? And I was coaching his under-7s team at the time. So that's where my football coaching journey starts, sort of on the muddy pitches and doing 5-a-side stuff and what have you. And Kai is doing, in a squash court, he's doing 4 kids, a couple of futsal balls and a couple of pop-up goals, which, if you're going to teach kids football, by the way, is the perfect environment. It's very high technique requirement, high speed, but also no space. So the kids are almost constrained by the environment to be it's perfect. And he continued with that until he was 10, which was the start of COVID. And along the way, we transitioned to Ringwood Town in their under-9s. I was still coaching, but we then joined the New Forest League, which the league stops every December, January, and February to play futsal. And that's the league that I now run. So the team that I was coaching joined part of that league, and we just said, well, we're going to play as much futsal as we possibly can then. It's absolutely brilliant for child development, both as its own sport, but also for football itself. And then my own journey, I'm just one of those weird guys who likes to get as many qualifications as possible. And I just did my badges, and I completed my UEFA B a couple of years ago.
Wow, I mean that's a pretty impressive journey, isn't it, dude?
It is impressive. I mean, I don't ever remember sort of a Pro B coach coming on. I don't even know whether we've had a Pro C or Pro D or whatever. But no, absolutely. I mean, any sort of plans to go sort of Pro A or?
I think it is very difficult for a dad who has coached to go and get into that. The stories of, there's been a couple around, like the Bielsas of this world, who have sort of come into it from a previous life and sort of got into football in their early 40s and found their way in.
Yeah,
there's one or two of them, but more and more the big clubs are looking for that A name. They're looking for Gerrard, they're looking for Lampard, they're looking for Rooney to really inspire the team, and I get that. I think there's room for people like myself in the game, either at grassroots level where we can be really really supportive, and probably in academies. And I know that a number of coaches who I have worked with over the years are now in paid roles working across various academies. So it's possible, but it's typically at the youth level and not often at first team. But in the women's game, there's a bit more progression maybe. But I think, again, and this is interesting, I think football is having a bit of a culture shock as to what coaching is. And I think that I'm hearing of a number of coaches leaving the game just because of the way that the culture in football at the moment at the professional level. It is so cutthroat, it is so performance driven that actually you don't have a chance to really develop yourself. You're going in, and if your team fails, then it's either the manager, the players, or the coach, and sometimes it's just easier to blame the coach.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see that anyway sometimes, don't you? If you look at it at the very top and the Premier League, you see it sometimes when the players are underperforming, but it's going to be the manager who gets the chop. And then the next game in, he's gone, and all of a sudden the players start playing again, and you think, well, hello there, what's going on? There is that sort of blame culture. And my brother-in-law he's sort of in the football world, so he previously used to coach with Man United, and he managed the different levels in terms of the different under 12s, under 40s, and all the way up. And it was when he managing the under 21 level that he really sort of felt the pressure. You know what I mean? All of a sudden he was being peaked on social media. He was reading his name on Twitter, not always in a positive light either. So the pressures of it. I know exactly what you're saying. It's challenging. It is challenging.
I just think the way that it's gone is, I mean, obviously the influx of finance, the influx of overseas investment, and they very much see it as, I suppose, as a business, as opposed to maybe historically it was, a sport, it was a hobby, it was X, Y, or Z, whereas now it is a business, and it is the business of football, and it is a results game. And unfortunately, I suspect that there's never really enough time given to whether it's managers or coaches in particular to see the fruits of your labor, sort of thing. You develop these people, and it'd be fantastic to see the development of them, and you stay with them. But I just those days are just gone. Literally, you just don't have time.
You know what? It's not, and I'm delighted to be able to say that it's not. The work that we've been doing with Ringwood, we've brought players through so that our under 18s are now playing in the first team, but we have players not who have just come from the local region, but have actually come through our entire pathway. And so I think you're still getting that at the grassroots level. And I think I've got a friend, Ed Bridges, who's part of a Newport County Exiles podcast group. He keeps talking about the way that the game is splitting, that you've got the Premier League and the Championship, which is almost now a completely different game to the more pure game of football, which is why he supports Newport County. And I very much see that at the grassroots level as well. That pure version of football, which is just people playing for fun. It's people who have played for their local team, and they did so as a kid, and they've made it through the ranks. That environment that I think spectators want to be part of, that is very much present at the grassroots level. It doesn't stop it being results driven, and you still see the pressure, but the business aspect of that is less. If your budget is £20,000 a year, you're not paying players. You're only having a couple of minibuses, and those balls have been around for a couple of years. It's that's a different environment, but I think it's something a lot of people can get behind. which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about grassroots football.
Indeed. Well, we do need to say hello to somebody else who is also involved in the grassroots football game at the very, very sort of entry level, who's finally joined us. Well, I say finally, we actually started without him, but I'm sure he'll be okay with that. David, how are you doing? Don't forget your phone. He's taking it off.
Good evening. Yeah, I mean, I was 5 minutes early, which is unusual for me, but you actually started 10 minutes early, which made me 5 minutes late. So thanks for that. It's no problem at all. Hi, Michael. Good to see you.
Hey, David. Good to see you too.
Yes, as Adam says, I'm involved in grassroots football, coaching football as well. I've coached girls' team and currently coach boys' team as well. I only caught the end of what you were saying there, Michael, but I know that AFC Allsager, our community club, we've got about 30 teams, and our first team is, I think, the majority made up of players that have come through the teams from, I don't know what age they were back to. Our youngest teams are under 8s, under 9s. So we've been around since 2012. So I think there will be players that have come all the way through. But I know over half the team are made up of players that have come through our lower age groups.
That's great.
That is impressive. That is pretty impressive, actually, to be fair. So futsal, anyway, let's take it back to futsal a little bit. So I'll be honest with you, it's a sport I probably hadn't heard of until, like Gaz, similar to Gaz, I suppose, a couple of years ago. And truthfully, if it was something that, I've played, same as Gaz, 5-a-side. I've played it not quite as well as Dave or Gaz, to be fair, but we won't get onto my lack of coordination. But if I were to get involved in futsal, truthfully, I don't know. I don't know of any local leagues around here. I mean, how popular is it in the UK?
It is growing in popularity. I would say that it is, if you're within Manchester or London, and bizarrely Southampton, the game is more accessible. Birmingham, there is a little bit in Birmingham, but it is largely constrained to the larger cities. At a youth level, proud to say that Hampshire is the biggest county for futsal in the whole of England. We've worked damn hard to make that the case, but we have about 30 teams of various different age groups playing in various competitions, which is great. The futsal league that I'm part of, tomorrow night we've got 6 teams rocking up to play against each other in a series of competitions. So that's it's great that it has legs. At the adult level, we've got 3 tiers of football. This Sunday, if you happen to be in Andover, Wessex are playing, and I'm third referee. So we have 2 referees one either side of the court, and then someone doing the stop clock, because when the ball goes out of play, the clock stops, and then it restarts when it goes back in. So I'm doing that, and yeah, so it's growing. I don't think it's mainstream yet, and I don't think that will be the case until the FA reposition themselves and actually get back invested in the sport. We used to have a male football team. If you're following your football coaches, Mike Scubala, who used to be the assistant manager at Leeds, and I think is now at Lincoln. He used to be the England futsal manager. Right. Then COVID hit, they cut the funding, and Scoobs basically left the sport, which is a huge loss. We no longer have a funded FA futsal team at the adult level. We do have, I think, under 21s or under 20s, something like that. And they've actually now split it out under a new company called England Futsal Limited, which is basically designed to host futsal for England. So very sadly, the FA is not where it was pre-COVID on futsal.
And why is that?
I'm pausing because I used to work for the FA. I used to do. I used to do a couple of. Well, there was a consultancy role that I did, and I was also known as a FA coach mentor. So I'm.
Please don't compromise yourself, by the way. But if you can't answer, then that's absolutely fine.
I can answer it. It's just I sort of still haven't made my peace with what they did. So the decision to cut futsal during COVID was frankly a funding one.
Right.
Their budget, they basically saw what was going to happen to their income over the next couple of years of COVID, and basically just went, I don't know what to do, kill everything. We're only going to focus on the core things for a couple of years. England at the time did not have a good futsal team. Our objective was over 5 years to make it into the top 50 in the world.
Right.
So yeah, we had a very, very long journey to go. I think what they had not appreciated was quite how good the current crop of young players coming through are, and it's the same group that Carsley has in the mainstream now. So these are very technical players who've come through the FA DNA pathway and really understand what it is to be that technical ball on the ground pivot player. We don't have a full squad, 12 players who can play at the international level. But I think we've got, over the next couple of years, we've got players coming through. And of course, we do play in the Futsal Champions League. The Manchester Futsal are there this year. And yeah, the national game is good quality. It's not Spanish level. It's not at the top level yet, but we're getting there.
Right. It just fascinates me, really, just that, that there seemed to be a want from the FA to develop these very technical players, and then and it, in a way, it's a shame that if it was in particular just a funding decision, that actually almost the sort of think tank that had got involved and tried to promote futsal, to promote these very technically gifted youngsters that can then go on and develop into the normal game, almost that's been lost, and everything has gone down to funding, and therefore it effectively becomes a funding decision. Because if we want 30 years of hurt, well, it's probably more than that now. Well, it is more than that here, but 30 years of hurt, and we haven't won a major trophy for however many years in terms of the adult male game. For something that was seen to be following suit from whether it's Spain or Brazil or wherever it was, that actually that sort of focus has almost been lost, and it literally was just a funding decision, and that's a shame, because there would be many technically gifted players that would have sort of, I suppose, prospered under the futsal system, that then are able to go into maybe the academies. And I don't know, Michael, would it be something that they develop futsal at maybe under 9, under 11, under 13, and then would they go into like the normal academies at sort of football level, or would they develop through futsal until they're under 21s, under 20s? How would that have worked?
Okay, so I've just got up on my soapbox, and you're going to have to pull me down in a minute. So just shout when I start waffling. But what you've raised is a fascinating issue with the way that English football and academies work. So over in Brazil, and this is not an uncommon, but it's a really good example, there is a very clear approach to skill development in futsal and football, and they dual track futsal and football until the age of 12, and at that point you split it off to the point that some leagues will do futsal 1 week on your match day, football the next week, and they alternate. They're given equal prominence, and you never have to make the decision that I'm going to move between one or the other sport until you're under 12 and you're fully developed as a under 12 player.
Yeah.
In England, we seem to have this weird desire to early specialize in football. And so if you're under 7 or you're under 8 and you're you're quite tall and quite strong for your age group, great, you're in an academy. But if you're under 12, you're almost never going to get picked for an academy. And I think this is what is fundamentally wrong with academy selection processes in England. But because of how academies are structured, which is part of the Premier League and then all the Premier League clubs, fundamentally, they actually don't have an obligation to think about the long-term development of all of their players, because they don't have homes for them. Their objective is to find 1, maybe 2 players every year group who may be good enough to go into the first team squad, or at the very least give competition for a first team squad place. That's all they're looking for. So you get these entire groups of players who are just there to make this one player look good and develop so that they can take him through.
Right.
So you're absolutely right that futsal should be part of every player's development. There is a Premier League futsal competition, and they play against each other. So it exists in the in the Premier League academies, and I guess it must exist in other clubs as well. But giving grassroots players access to futsal, that's really difficult, mostly because people don't know how to link the futsal clubs in with grassroots teams. it's very possible and doable. They just need to talk to each other. But the second point is one of funding. If you're paying 50, 60 quid an hour for a sports hall and you've got, I don't know, let's say you've got maybe 7 or 8 kids rocking up per team, you're talking close to 5 quid if you include referees' costs and maybe a bit of money for the club per player for an hour before you're breaking even. Well, that's not sustainable for most people at the moment, if you're playing every week. Plus you've got football, plus you've got all the other commitments.
Yeah.
So, and it's futsal. I mean, what do you mean? We're playing 5-a-side, but the ball doesn't go off the wall, and I can't pass it back to the keeper, and you do kick-ins, and there is still a sort of sense of, well, futsal's not proper football. Yeah. When I can assure you that it's got more excitement than an 11-a-side game, hands down.
And I suppose I say football is very cyclical, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And I suppose you go through phases of. I remember looking at the Premier League and look at, I suppose, almost maybe the Arsenal Invincibles. Maybe you look at some like quite a big, like back in the day when Portsmouth were in the Premier League, quite big, quite physically imposing people, and almost the very sort of short people. Like no way, that's not going to happen. And then it went quite cyclical because you got somebody like Pep Guardiola and his Barcelona side that was very much tiki-taka, and they were very much after the much shorter, very, very technically gifted people. And I just wonder whether or not football went that way inclined because of the Spanish influence of futsal, and actually they spent so much time developing the technical side of the game that, and I'm not saying that the physical attributes aren't important, but almost the physical attributes were a byproduct, and actually what they were looking for was a very technically gifted, and I'll use someone like Gomez, the young lad that's made a couple of England debuts, quite short in stature, but very, very technically gifted on the ball. Mm-hmm. And I wonder whether or not, somebody like a Guardiola would have gone into like the futsal leagues, or obviously wouldn't be him. It would have been the coach and the scouts and stuff. But, and actually they started looking for these very, very technically gifted, short in stature people that are very, very good at receiving the ball, in tight areas and being able to distribute very quickly and so on and so on. And football is very cyclical in nature. So, and I wonder whether or not, like I say, almost Pep's team became a byproduct of the fact that futsal is very, very, very big and very, very, very popular in Spain. And I don't know whether there is a correlation or not. But to me, it would seem as though there possibly is that is the case.
So there's a couple of things. First of all, the way that Spain do sport is different to us. So sporting facilities in Spain are typically free to use, and then they're run by the council. I happen to be in Spain. My son is weird. He's also part of the England junior pétanque squad. Yes, we have such a thing. And they went to a Euros competition in Spain earlier this year, which was an experience. But we were next to a venue which was 2 futsal courts, in Spain, but completely free to access and use. You just had to book it, and we would never have that facility in the UK. Even if you could make it, we would never have it. So I think you've got a facilities difference, and if you build it, they will come, they will use it. So I wouldn't exactly say that it's the club's fault or it's anything to do with the clubs. It's actually how we develop our players and the facilities that we have access to. But it's not to say that we don't have futsal in the UK and it doesn't link through. So Max Kilman at Wolves, Kobe Mainu, they have both played futsal and made the leap. Max Kilman actually made the leap from adult futsal into Wolves, and Kobe Mainu came through he was at Manchester Futsal Club and then went to Manchester United, and so he did do the dual track. So it is possible to make the leap. And I think you will see more and more players make that leap. But I think they are very much the exception because of how the academy structure works in English football.
Yeah. Sorry. No, go on, carry on.
No, I was just going to say that it's the EPPP and all the financial frameworks as well do not support that. So actually you need to have a fundamental reformation of how football is governed in the UK. And the regulatory structure of that really needs to change in order to actually see the way that I think what we all want to see, which is our local kids coming through, being given the chance to shine and actually having a chance at the higher level.
We had in our girls team, the girls team I started at under 10s, we had a girl who was sort of head and shoulders above the others at technical ability. She played a lot of football with the brothers, and she was involved with Stoke City, and she wasn't given an academy place, but I think she was in one of their development squads. And she was in the futsal development squad rather than the sort of football. Is football the opposite of futsal in this context? The non-futsal football squad. So for a whole season, she was not in the academy, she was in the futsal, which is great because it meant she could still play with us. But last season, she's actually now joined the full academy. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but Stoke City did have some kind of setup for futsal for kids that weren't quite ready for the academy. So whether they were using that to improve the technical ability and the footwork and the skills to sort of bridge that gap to get them into the full academy.
I think that futsal, you have to see it as its own sport and as its own game in and of itself, but you can see it as a training aid for football. And it sounds like Stoke have absolutely nailed it and gone, okay, we've got some players here who will make it. We need a bit of tweaking. We'll create a holding pattern for them, if you will, and we'll give them the technical input, and we'll give them, the futsal is incredibly cardio intensive. You are sprinting, and most players typically manage 3-4 minutes before they have to sub off the pitch. So to give players that holding pattern and to say, okay, yeah, go play futsal, that sounds like a brilliant idea from Stoke, and they should be commended for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. My knowledge is pretty much what I've said, but I do know that she did the futsal for a season and then she joined the academy this season, which, and I don't know if this is something you touched on before I joined or if it's something you've got a view on, but we struggled because she's joined the academy, so she can't play for us anymore because she's in the academy, and she's now, whereas a lot of our players would play for two teams and they'd go for training at like Crew Alex or in the development centres at Stoke. So they'd perhaps be playing football in 3 or 4 different groups of people every week. They joined the academy and they could only play for the academy, and they might have 1 match a week and they might be a sub for half that game. So we're seeing some of the girls that have left our team have gone from playing perhaps 2 or 3 matches a week with 3 or 4 training sessions with different groups of people to training in the academy and maybe playing half a game a week. And for us, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. But it doesn't need to from them.
No,
because their objective is to get that one player through the pathway into the adult team.
Yeah, you throw the 99 away and hinder their development. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, because it's about performance. It's about the first team outcome, not about everything along the way. And I understand how teams and clubs are set up, and there is a financial thing to this. And down at Ringwood, we've developed a great partnership with AFC Bournemouth and their Community Sports Trust, and so they've helped build a 3G, and we've got a lovely pavilion, and it works really well as a partnership. But you start to see the inner workings slightly of how just the girls' side of the game works, let alone the male side. And you can see the pressure that the first team coach for the girls' team is under, and the ladies' team, sorry, and how he's having to perform week in, week out, and his coaching team. And then you look at the development squads in the years below that, and that pressure just cascades down. And it's all about, can we develop that one player, those 2 players to go through and win the next, win a league and get promoted and do everything we need to do? Because it's about the sponsorship, it's about the branding, it's about adding value to the shareholder and everything else. And the purity of the game is being lost in all of that. And myself and you, David, can talk for hours about grassroots and development and how we get players to be as good as they can be. But we see that from wanting to go for a beer with them when they're 35 and reminisce. I very much doubt that the owner of Manchester United is going to say, well, actually, tell you what, Kobe, let's go for a pint and talk about all those goals you scored.
You know what, Michael, what you said there, I mean, different coaches have different ethoses to youth football. When I was asked to start this girls team under 10s, They're into their 4th season now. I'm not a main coach anymore. I'd never done coaching before, but I did some learning, went around, talked to lots of coaches, learned as much as I could over a 3-4 months period, threw out a load of emails to our broader Wildcats group, which had 40 odd girls playing, and basically got 12 girls that had never played in a team. Some had played some football and been to summer camps, but none of them had played in a team. Got them all together. On that first day, with them all there with the parents, I said to them that my aim is for you girls to play football, to enjoy football, to become better footballers, and to develop as individuals and your personalities and everything that football and team sports bring to it. And I said, hand on heart, if we never win a game, but in 20 years' time, I'm walking around this hub and I see you all playing football, I'll be very happy. And that was my mindset. And as we got going in the first season, we didn't win a game. And we drew one. No, but I tell you what, when you've got 12 girls and you're losing 13-14-0 every week when we started. Bear in mind that when on our very first game at the soccer centre, the players are saying to me, some of them are, "What's the ref? What's the throw-in? What's a free kick?" That's where we started. And we were often putting 9-10 players on the pitch. It was 7-a-side and still losing 10-12, 13-0. But they came off and nearly every week they were smiling and laughing. And when I think it was 2 or 3 games at the end of the season, we drew at 7-a-side. So no extra players and drew. The look on their face and the excitement and enjoyment, it was just priceless. And they've gone from strength to strength. And all 12 of those girls, they're in different teams. We're in the 4th season now, but all 12 of those girls have gone from under 9s, to under 13s, and they're still playing in teams. And that makes me super proud, because those first 2 seasons are the hardest, and that I think is where they would be most likely to drop out when it's difficult. They're losing, they're learning, they're new to it. But to see them. But what I realised quite quickly is that the attitude of, as long as we're enjoying it, it's okay. It's not sustainable, because the better players, the more ambitious players, the more technically gifted players, the players that perhaps have more support from siblings or parents that are pushing them in a not in a living dreams through their kids way, but just pushing them to be the best they can. They don't want to be in a team that loses every week. And you end up having to let players move and separate your teams out. And then it gets harder and harder as they get older. If good players keep leaving, it's really hard to hold a team together.
But I suppose I've coached sort of not football. I've coached a couple of different sports. Cricket was my sort of summer sport growing up as such. So, but it's about developing. It's about developing those pathways that if you do get certain individuals that can then work through those pathways and progress and become better, then that's fine, and that's absolutely okay, as long as in a way that's not necessarily to the detriment of the enjoyment and everybody else along the way. I think finding those pathways is really important, because you have got the development of young people. Is everything okay there, Michael?
Yeah, no, it's all right. I exist in a very weird world that it currently involves 5 dogs, and it's feeding time. It's feeding time at the zoo, and one of their tails just decided to hit an ornament.
Right, marvelous.
It's fine.
Brilliant. But no, and just saying, I mean, talent identification is obviously is a huge issue, and it's really, really, really important. As is the identification of the pathways that do allow those slightly better players, the more technically gifted players, to progress up the pyramid. And I think that's just that's just the human nature. If you are relatively serious about playing sport, and I know, Dave, that you were saying that these girls that started and they weren't necessarily serious about playing sport. It's more about the enjoyment, but along the way, for X number of those players, it becomes slightly more serious for them, and they might see an opportunity to develop. And I think if you can develop those pathways and you can develop those talent pathways, but as I say, it's really important to hold what's dear to you, to you and your ethos and your team in terms of the enjoyment as well. And it's not just about that one player, but it's about providing that one player, if they feel as though they want it, an opportunity to succeed. And it's a real, for me, you know, I had a couple of really, really talented young cricketers and stuff, and all of a sudden, and I don't know if it's the same in the football world, but they would go to the county cricket setup, and they all of a sudden would be part of the county cricket school, which then meant that they probably weren't able to play few at the weekend because, as you said, Dave, they're probably away doing various other things. But I think that's really important to still have that, but also to still try to develop that grassroots level. So from a cricket point of view, there is a natural progression. You might go second team, you might go first team, and you might get picked up along the way. And you might go and play county cricket, or you might go and play, you know, you might go touring or whatever it may be. But that pathway is there, and I'm a big believer that it's important that pathway is there, just because the talent identification is so important. And if you want to carry on and you want to succeed and you want to play and you want to improve yourself, then that's absolutely fine. But I also wholeheartedly agree that shouldn't be to the detriment of everybody else's enjoyment, and you shouldn't always just be set up for that one or two individuals.
I completely agree with you, as long as you're not selecting at too early an age.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
And yeah, I think the way that cricket works with the stratification, and it seems to sort of select out at under 13s, under 14s, and
yes,
you've had your youth experience. Great, okay, now you're ready to take this a little bit more seriously. Yeah. The fact we put under 7s, under 8s into academies, and then say, okay, you're going to be here for 10 years. This will be your main sport for 10 years, and then at the end of it, there is no future. That's brutal, and in my opinion, it's morally wrong.
Yeah, and you're right. And in particular, I suppose I mean, I don't know whether it's necessarily changed now. I mean, I'm wrong side of 50 now, and I'm going back to 20 years, 30 years. But what would happen is that you would continue to play your local league cricket at under 9, under 11, under 13, give or take. And as you said, Michael, what would happen then is that at that point, probably the coaches, you know, your level 2 coaches, your level 3 coaches, if you're lucky enough to have a level 3 in your local cricket club, they would probably have talent identified. And then at the age of 13, 14, at that point, they probably would have said to the counties, you need to have a look at this person or this person. But they certainly wouldn't be doing that at under 7, under 8, under 9. That just doesn't really happen in cricket. It is a little bit later. And they've gone through that period of growth and enjoyment and everything else. And it isn't to the be all and end all and to the detriment of everybody else. But so I suppose the identification comes much later for the talent in cricket as football.
Indeed. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Paul Kelly as well, who makes a comment there. He's added that Dave to succeed Tuchel. We'll gloss over the fact that Paul is north of the border in Scotland, and it might be a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Well, they had a decent result. Was it last night they did?
Scotland had a very good result. Yeah, very good result. So, interesting enough, though, we see how we work it around to the international side there. So, in terms of the international side of futsal, I was having a look, like I say, England aren't represented. And you won't be too surprised to see Brazil at top of the ratings there, Spain are way up there. And some of the other countries, you know, who are very, very big in football are also very well represented in futsal. And then third ranked in the world was Iran, which really, really surprised me. So it just goes to show, you know what I mean, where there's focus and where there's attention, what can actually be achieved. So without getting too far down the reasons why England aren't doing it, what's next for futsal? How do we develop it? Does the onus come from yourself and clubs like yourself, or does it require the FA to get involved, or do you guys need to keep knocking on that FA door?
I think the next step is advertising, and the next step is TV revenue. So I hate to be the finance director in the room. Sadly, I am one. But I don't think you can actually grow the sport beyond an amateur base without giving TV money into it, or finding some other way of funding it, because otherwise you're constantly reliant on FA grants and other things. 2 seasons ago, BT Sports showed every single futsal match at the top tier on YouTube. That was brilliant, completely free to air. No one watched it, but it was good to watch. It was good that it was there. I think they may need to take the plunge and maybe do a highlights package, and I don't know, maybe just run it a couple of times every week, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, fill in the gap somewhere, and just show people the sport, and go that way, and try and find a way of getting it into popular culture and consciousness. Failing that, BBC aren't doing much with sport at the moment. It's doable. All the futsal matches have to be actually. It was very easy to get a camera there, and it's quite easy to record the sport. So it's not impossible to do. But I think until you get it in people, find a way of getting it in front of people's eyeballs, it's not going to work, because we're all playing at venues that hold a maximum of 100, 200 people. Wessex play, for example, they play in Andover Leisure Centre, which is about as British Empire as you can get. It's an old school reference there for those who remember it. Actually, niche trivia, but also filmed at Ringwood Leisure Centre. But yeah, you can find ways of growing the sport, and you can find ways of making it better. But I think at the top level, we just have to find a way of investing in it more. And without putting it in a massive arena, it's really difficult to do.
I might be wrong, and I probably am. I regularly am. And I want to say it was futsal as opposed to five-a-side, but I might be wrong. Was it last year, a couple of years ago? Didn't Sky do something? Was it the national indoor finals, or was that five-a-side? I'm possibly thinking it might be five-a-side now as opposed to futsal, but they ran and there was like an amateur, and then there was like a ladies and a girls, and they ran various age groups, and they screened it. And I want to say it was futsal, but it might not have been. It might be five-a-side. I can't remember.
That was the FA Pokemon Cup. So it's a youth futsal cup that's run. It was run 2 years ago. They didn't run it in the same format last year.
Right.
And I sincerely hope that if they're listening, they learned from that mistake and they need to run it better. It didn't work particularly well last year. But yeah, it was a great experience. And actually, we were part of that experience down in Hampshire, and to see the players being told, "Oh, hang on a minute! If I win all these games, I play one at St George's Park, and two, I get to be on TV. Hell yeah, up for that!" And you could see the intensity increase. So yeah, it was a great idea. Do that again.
So why didn't they do it then last year, or why was it perceived to either not work, or why was it not necessarily televised that's last year, whereas it was like 2 years ago? What was the reason? Was it literally just funding from TV, or?
So what they did is they split it across 3 age groups: under 12s, under 14s, under 16s.
Right.
Under 14s was run in the same way. Under 12s was much more, this is youth, and it was much more grassroots tournament type style-y type thing, and that was sort of kept to one side. And then the under 16s, and I can't remember why this decision was made, but I want to, in the back of my head, it was something to do with the fact that they allowed academy teams in.
Right.
They forced that to be played home and away over a range of fixtures. And that just didn't work for all the grassroots teams who were previously part of the Pokemon Cup.
Right. Okay.
So again, it was a kind of a weird scenario. It's sort of like saying, okay, we're going to have a cup for all the futsal teams. Ringwood Town, you can have a team. Wessex, you can have a team. Wessex are in the Ringwood Town grassroots. We don't really have a futsal team, but we had some players who played it a bit. We chucked them in. Wessex, your first team are playing in the National League. Yep, you can have your team in. And Chelsea, yes, you can put your team in as well.
Right. Okay.
It became somewhat one-sided. So I think they're reviewing the structure for this year.
At a grass level, I mean that's sorry, by the way, that's never going to work, is it? If you put a Premier League club with the funding and talent pool that they've got against grassroots or lower league, it's just not going to work. So it's going to become pointless, isn't it? And de-incentivize anyone from doing it. We had a very similar thing in our county cup. We were in our boys team, our lads team, 2 or 3 seasons ago. We were we entered the county cup for Cheshire, and it wasn't seeded at all. So we were pretty much the worst team in the league, and we were drawn against the previous season's runner-up. And we had to drive all the way to Chester, so it was over an hour. So in the middle of winter, it was bloody cold, and the ref basically stopped the game at like 14-0, 10 minutes into the second half. And we haven't entered the county cup since, because it's just pointless. Because if you get drawn against that again, you're just going to hide into nothing, and there's no incentive to do it. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. What I was going to ask as a question was, futsal at grassroots, I think of where we play at the hub, we've got good facilities. It's we've got Astro as well as grass pitches. But when you look at the Astro currently, there's like a billion different lines on there of 15 different colors. It's quite hard to see where the pitches are quite often. Futsal would just be another set of lines for another color, and the goals don't. I mean, I don't know much about futsal, but looking online now, the goals at 3 by 2 meters, they're not the size of any of the goals that we currently have on the Astro.
Do you have hockey goals?
We do have a hockey pitch as well.
And if you've got hockey goals, use those and use the 5-a-side pitch markings.
Yeah, so we'd have to drag. Well, I'm not sure how the relationship is between AFC All-Sager Hockey and AFC All-Sager Football.
I'm sure it's fine.
The hockey pitch itself is never used. I think the Astro, I don't know technically, but the Astro seems to be different than the Astro on the football is obviously like longer, grassier type.
You've got the sand-based stuff. That's even better.
Yeah,
because the ball, the futsal ball will zip off that. That's
it's rubber. We've got the black rubbery bits on the Astro.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, it's that one. Okay, that's it's not too bad.
Then the hockey pitch seems to be much firmer. Doesn't have a grassy thing to it. So we probably have to nick their goals onto the Astro pitch.
I think ultimately, it's doable. Where there's a will, there's a way, isn't there? And I think, obviously the futsal ball is completely different. Smaller, doesn't bounce, so there's something straight away, and it's not quite as easy as just let some air out of that normal football. It really is something completely different. And but again, it would take somebody like yourself, Dave, to go right. Actually, you know what? In this coaching session or in this session, we are going to do futsal, and we are, let's introduce it at grassroots level. Let's try to get some interest in it, but with the greatest respect, Dave, not just you, but you need you to be replicated X, Y, and Z across multiple different teams, groups, areas, regions, in order for that then to develop. And Michael, sounds like you're doing a fantastic job, down on the South Coast in terms of doing that sort of. But if you're going to get it the recognition it needs, that needs to be replicated on a huge scale, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's not something that's easy to get off the ground when it doesn't exist. The football is a fairly low cost item, but you've got to get people doing it, and you've got to get coaches across the teams and the younger teams in particular actually wanting to do it as part of their coaching sessions to start with, and then you've got to get them to perhaps play some games, and then you've got to look at expanding that out to other clubs in the area, and then get into club games, and then you've got to hope that then your branch of we're South Cheshire, there's multiple in Cheshire, South Cheshire, Mid Cheshire, etc. You've got to get your South Cheshire League to then be interested, and to run just our South Cheshire League, it's all run by volunteers, from the refs to the people that organise the matches to the league rules. And it's a huge amount of work. And those people that are involved in running the leagues and running our club, and I'm sure Michael's the same where you are, they are already totally maxed out, because what tends to happen is you get a few people, a very small number of people that take responsibility, and they end up totally saturated. So there's very little capacity to ever look at anything new. And to get something like this up and running, you need quite a few people to put the time and the passion and the energy into doing it. So I don't think it's something you can just rock up and say, hey, let's try this, and hope that it just ripples out, because it's much bigger than that.
I'd agree. We got very, very lucky with the way we set ourselves up. So about 10 years ago now, a guy called Lee Silverwood set up the New Forest League. He had been coaching an under-14s group got incredibly frustrated with the league that they were part of, and created the New Forest League with a grant from Hampshire FA. But the proviso was that the grant was in 2 stages. 50% of it went to the clubs if they stayed in the league for 2 years.
Right.
So that allowed the creation of the new league, new provision, which then the county FA was mandated to start providing that it had targets for that, but it also had a target to achieve more futsal being played. So it ticked 2 boxes for that for the local county FA. At the moment, the county FAs do not have a futsal target, so there's no interest in it because they're only going to fund things that they have targets for, because of the way the county FAs are funded is hit all your targets, get more money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's
sorry,
I was just going to follow up from Michael, and that money, there's money available. We running our WildSat session a couple of weeks ago. I was down there helping out, and there was a member of the FA that came down, and again, it's all girls. And at the end of the session, we're just talking. She's very impressed with our setup. We do have a really good setup, and she basically just said, "Oh, have you had this grant yet?" And was like, "No, we don't know about that one. Like, it's £500." And within a couple of weeks, we've got bibs, cones, balls, all sorts of stuff just turned up. So we didn't know it existed. She came down to look at our sessions, was impressed, and just said, "You know what? You can have this money." So there is money there. But I think there's an order of magnitude, again, from what Michael you're saying there, to commit to funding to a bunch of teams to run a league for 2 seasons. That's more than a few £100.
It's about £2,000 if you want it, but that should, in theory, be completely recyclable. Because if every team pays their way, and you can sort of our New Forest Futsal League has a cash balance of about £1,500 pretty much consistently, which is enough for us to invest, do cool stuff, book venues out as we need to. But we've just had to book the New Forest League's Sunday fixtures. We're going to need 4 venues this year because of the number of teams we've got involved, and I've just had an invoice through for December, January, and February for 1 venue. That's £2,100. Payable in advance. There you are. And that's just the reality of one, how costly it is, but also how futsal has to run these days. So it unfortunately, and it shouldn't do, but it comes back down to money.
Yeah. I mean, the leisure centre, our local leisure centre, to hire the whole hall, the entire hall, I think it's £64 an hour.
Yeah, right.
So it's not cheap. And if you're setting up a team, you've got your insurance, you've got your kit, you've got everything else, the equipment that goes with it. So it's not and availability, actually, our local leisure centre and our hub, the pitches are just completely maxed out. There's no free spaces on them, so we'd really struggle to find anywhere local to run it as well.
Secondary schools.
Our secondary school, which is across the road from our hub, also just had new Astro pitches, and they are fully booked out all evenings between 6 and 9.
Do they have a sports hall?
That's the sports hall I was referring to.
Okay.
Also fully booked out between 6 and 9. And I know this because I was ringing around to find another training session for my lads team a few weeks ago. We end up now training. We have a second session. We have to train 5 till 6 on a Friday. It's either that or 9 till 10. And funny enough, when we asked about 9 till 10, no parents were that keen to take their kids to training at that time.
Yeah. This is what coaches have to do. I mean, for a while, one of my teams were training. There's a local army base to us. They had a PT Nissan hut, and we were training in that because that was the only affordable thing that we could use.
So we've got a question then from Paul Kelly, who says, "Do you think making a futsal team of ex-England footballers for an exhibition would pique interest for people who don't really know the sport, or has it already been done?"
I'm thinking back to a match that it's on YouTube. You can see it. They had it was in India, and it was pre-COVID, and they had Indian players, but they also had a couple of internationals who were playing. So Ronaldinho was there. there's a couple of other famous players who I really should know the names of, and it's embarrassing that I don't. But Ryan Giggs and Scholes were there as well.
Right.
And Scholes was in his element.
Yeah.
Pinging the ball around, not a problem. I've never seen Ryan Giggs look so completely lost on a football pitch. Yeah. So in answer to the question, I think it would be a brilliant idea, but I think it would be probably worth bringing in futsal players as well.
Yeah.
And to have, we have an England male futsal squad. It's just it's there and it's thereabouts, and it is vaguely coming through. And we've got players who are good enough to be playing international football. I'd pick from them from the National Futsal League, and I'd say, tell you what, here's a squad. Here's some England football players and any player who wants to get involved. Let's have a match. I think that would be a really good.
Yeah.
That would be a really good watch. And yeah, like you say, it's making people aware of it, but also it's not just the sound bites are from both Ronaldos, from Messi saying futsal made me as a player. It's actually opening up and seeing that the game can be played.
Just interesting, and just as you were talking, then sort of vague memory popped in again. When they used to run like the Masters tournaments, and was it like Birmingham Indoor Arena or Manchester Arena, and they had teams from such as Everton, Liverpool, and they had all the Masters teams in, so all the Premier League teams, and they had obviously all of the old, pros playing. Was that futsal, or was that effectively just five-a-side? And I'm trying to.
I seem to remember it being a weird variant of something.
Yeah, and I know, because I remember kickings, and I remember, but I don't remember necessarily the ball being like a futsal ball, because I remember it like bouncing and stuff. So,
Yeah.
And it was like almost like a weird hybrid. But I wonder, again, just leading on from the question as to whether or not maybe almost like a Masters tournament, but with the futsal setup, so you can't pass back, and you've got the ball that doesn't bounce, and so on, and whether that might sort of pique the interest, because you would have some players theoretically who are okay, whilst their cardio might have gone and they might be slightly tubbier around the waist than they used to be, but technically they would probably still be relatively proficient, and I wonder whether that might pique some interest, and I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to do two things. First of all, it's going to be another booking for the venue. And actually, right now, venues need booking. So that's a good thing to do. But secondly, it's going to just raise awareness.
Yeah.
And futsal internationally is not a sport that needs awareness. It's an England thing. It's a Britain thing. So yeah, let's put it on. Let's make it happen. Of course, more futsal is always better.
Well, just I'll say one question. Go back to really what you do and what sort of Dave does. I mean, you, Mike, obviously Pro B. And please excuse my ignorance. Coaches for football, are the skills then transferable to coaching futsal, or is there a very, very different coaching pathway for futsal and football, and are they transferable?
So if anyone wanted to get into football coaching, I would recommend they did the first futsal course first.
Right.
Because I think it's a one-day course, very short, and it's a really good introduction into what is sports coaching.
Yeah.
I would also probably recommend the RFU level 1, which I've heard nothing but great things about as a coaching qualification. Currently, and again, this is a post-COVID thing, the football qualifications, you've got introduction to Playmaker, which is your first one, and then you've got introduction to football. Those are what's the old level 1 and part of the level 2.
Yeah.
Then they've now created something called the UEFA C, and that then needs UEFA B, and then A, and then Pro. So they're comparable, but I think that any coaching course shouldn't teach you things. It should teach you how to reflect on what you're trying to teach and support the learner in. So, and I have an ILM7 in business coaching. The course was not, we're going to teach you about business, which the coach was, okay, how do you and what do you need to do better to coach in business and to coach leaders?
Yeah.
And so the skill sets are transferable, but only if the course is at the right level to get you to reflect on what that skill set is.
Right. So it's not necessarily the technical skill. It's almost the process and the reflective nature of the process that you go through in order to be better.
At the well, there is obviously a certain amount of teaching that needs to be involved around football in safeguarding and player welfare and what have you. And it's very much what the early stages of the course are. I think level 2, the UEFA C, is about sort of the initial reflection bit. The UEFA B, you then start getting into quite technical areas, and you need to be able to demonstrate technical knowledge. And this, I think, is where it's perhaps interesting to consider what we mean by a football coach, because a lot of people think coaching is about teaching and telling. And for your Pep Guardiolas, it probably is. You will do this. You will move in this pattern because I want to remove all risk, and this is how I want the game to be played. Whereas for others who have a more free-flowing version of this game, this concept of relativism that's come in, they're probably more, actually, you need to reflect on where you need to be as a player on the pitch and what role you need to take up in this moment to allow the ball to be retained and the pattern of play, which is why you have all these rotations of players and what have you, which is something we see huge amounts in futsal. The game is just rotation. There is no striker or defender. Everyone shares every position. But that technical knowledge comes through reflection, but not necessarily you're not necessarily being taught it on the course. And your own philosophy evolves over time as well. So the coach I was before my UEFA B and the coach I was after my UEFA B and the coach I am now are three very different people as I continue to refine and reflect on my philosophy.
Right.
So I think that's the skill set that we need to be adapting more in our coaching qualifications. I think we need to be encouraging our coaches to not be teachers or tellers. We need to be getting the players to reflect. Not least because I think we have a general lack of reflective skills in this country, but that's a very different topic of conversation.
I mean, there's a massive bugbear of mine when I still do coach a bit, but particularly when I was learning to coach and I was deciding how I wanted to coach, it was the number of coaches you see, and I still see it, that basically tell the player what to do with the ball every time it's at the feet. This is during a match. And I'm very much in the belief that you allow them to make their own decisions. And ball mastery was something I was really strong on, which probably feeds into futsal as well. Getting them to, all the things that you see, the tricks and skills with the feet. And I coached some of the boys in the boys team that just said, I got involved with them, I think under 12s, under 13s, and they said, what we doing ball mastery for? What do we need those for? What would you need drag backs and soul rolls and things like that? So I actually got onto YouTube and put together a little video of people like Messi and Neymar, and basically all they're doing when they got the ball at the feet is drag backs and soul rolls and toe taps and all these kind of really, really basic things, but they're doing it without thinking. And I in my coaching journey over the last 3-4 years, I've seen the best coaches are the ones that really spend time on the ball mastery and encourage the kids to do it away from the training sessions, so that when they get to under 12s, under 13s, and the ball's being passed into them, they're not thinking about how they're going to control that ball. They're just going to control it, and they're thinking about where am I going to play it, what am I going to do with it. Those that don't have their core ball mastery skills, they're looking down at the feet, they're looking at the ball, they're faffing around with it, and by the time they've got it under control, they're being tackled. And the second thing is allowing them to make their own decisions. So off the ball, you might give them some positional advice during the game, but basically when they're on the ball, they're making their own decisions, and whatever decision they make, that's fine. And one of the biggest challenges I had early on was you'd be encouraging the kids, and we'd say, right, in this game, I want you to, whenever you get the ball, I want you to try and beat one player and then pass it. And they could try 3, 4, 5 times, and they knew what I'd asked them to do, and they didn't mind if they kept getting tackled or kept losing it. But then you start to get parents shouting, pass it. Why aren't you passing it?
Yeah.
And we nipped that in the bud quite quickly, and the parents were great generally, but you see it in a lot of other teams, and the parents are shouting, why don't you pass it? Why don't you try and beat him? Why don't you shoot? And they've got no idea what the coach has said. The coach could have said to him, right, this next game, it's an opportunity for everyone to dribble with the ball, or for everyone to shoot, or for everyone to do X, Y, and Z, and your parents and you know, don't appreciate that. And there's so many factors that take away from kids' decision making that make it really hard for them.
Yeah. And that's something that we don't provide particularly well in coach education. We sort of say, okay, here's how you coach a session, here's how you coach in a match, but they completely forget the outside influences and how to control the parents and all the spectators. And by the way, you know, this week you might have your normal group of spectators. That's great. But what happens if the grandparent comes for one particular weekend and hasn't been told what's going to happen? And there's got shouting, go on, fight for it, pass, and go on, off you go, run with it, and all this stuff that the grandparents love to come out with. You know, how do you deal with that? We don't give the coaches the complete skill set, and we sort of leave them to go, find their own way. But in most coaches start at under sevens, which is the most important year group, for ball mastery. And so by the time they're 3 years in and therefore pretty good at what they're doing, you've sort of missed this golden sweet spot.
Yeah, definitely.
And one thing that we do need to do, I'm afraid, is blow the final whistle on this episode as we wrap things up round about the hour mark. I have a feeling that Michael's maybe got at least one episode in him more, and maybe 2 or 3. So I think we'll bring him back for
the second half.
For a second half, yeah. I was going to say for a second leg, yeah. And and if you're free at some time in the new year, we'd love to get you back on and just bend your ear a little bit more about the sport of football, sport of futsal, and maybe a little bit about what the world of football can learn from futsal, because there's probably a few things that it can take from that. But for now, we would like you to say your goodbyes to our listeners, and leave us with one final thought about the points that you've been making today.
Well, it's been great to be here, guys. Thank you very much. And to everyone who's been out there, thank you for putting up with me and for listening. I suppose the final point I'd leave is get on YouTube and type in great futsal goals. And there are tons of them. And if the game gives you one thing, it's loads of shots and loads of goals. And for me, that makes it a really exciting game. It's 10 minutes of viewing pleasure. Go and enjoy it. And if you want to go and watch some more, please do.
There you go. David, are you going to be taking anything away from this for your practice sessions?
I'm not a lead coach anymore, so I don't get to set the sessions very often. But what I will do is I will go and dig into futsal, because although we don't have a futsal ball, I'm sure the principles of a futsal training session can still be done with normal footballs. I'll probably just nick a size 5 or size 4, slightly smaller ball. And if I do, next time I'm covering and I'm leading a session, I'm going to try and run a futsal session to see what happens.
Cool. Gaza?
Yeah, learnt loads. I'd heard of football. I obviously, been fascinated listening to Michael. And from somebody with, quite a sporty background, it's fascinating just to talk about those pathways and those experiences of the young kids. And I'd love to get Michael back on again, as I say, just to talk about the intricacies of the development of players through under 7s, under 9s, under 11s, and things like that. So I've been fascinated by it. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Can't believe it's been an hour and 8 minutes or whatever we're up to now. Time has flown for me. And I actually genuinely can't wait till if he is willing to, Michael, come. I mean, he might tell us to do one. Say, he definitely isn't. But if he would be so kind to grace us with his presence again, I'd really, really, really look forward to picking this up and continuing the chat.
Definitely, yeah. We'll definitely look at getting Michael on again next year, because I do feel there's still many more topics that we can cover in the world of futsal and football as well. And like I say, what the two can learn from each other. But for us, for now, we will be back. If you're on the live streams, you're watching us live, we'll be back in about 20 minutes time, 10 minutes time, something like that, as long as it takes us to set up the internet and fathom it out at my 50 years of age. But if you're not, if you're listening to the audio, then we'll catch you next week with something entirely different again.